Today, we're back on our Backsplash project and we're ready for grout. Before we get started, I want to talk about what products you're going to need to do a professional quality backsplash job. So the first thing, obviously, is you're going to need a good quality grout. Whenever you're choosing a grout, you always want to make sure that it's going to be compatible with the type of tile you have. A traditional masonry grout, you need to have at least an 1/8 of an inch grout joint. A non-sanded grout, you're going to be an 1/8 inch or smaller typically. It doesn't hold as well in larger joints, and we typically don't use that anymore. In substitute of that, we use a product like Prism that is a synthetic. And one nice thing about the synthetic is if you're using a backsplash tile that has scratchable properties in it, like if it's a natural stone or a glass, it won't affect the surface of it. It'll stay nice and shiny, will not hurt it. Whereas a sand-based grout product will essentially sandpaper the surface of the tile. Now, beyond the actual grout itself, you're going to want to get a color-matched grout. And this is an acrylic latex. It's not really waterproof, so we don't want to use that along our bottom joint. This is used for inside corners and touch-ups. This is 100% silicone, and it's color matched as well. It doesn't have the texture of the grout, so it's not great for touch-ups, but this is what we want to use along the surface between the tile and the countertop. A good painter's caulk, which will be perfect for using along the edges against cabinets, at the edges where it meets drywall, and in this case where we have white cabinets, we're going to run this along between the tile and the cabinet itself on the top. Once we're finished wiping everything down, we're going to use our spray-away glass cleaner to remove any remaining haze from anything. You're always going to want to start every grout project with a fresh set of sponges, and I like to use microfibers when I wipe down because it doesn't leave any lint that could potentially get embedded into the grout itself. A couple of brand new clean buckets is always a good idea too. Okay, so we're ready to mix our grout. We came to the other room that's under construction just so we have a nice quiet place to talk, and if we make a mess, it's not a big deal in here. Whenever you're mixing grout, the most important thing is you do not overwater it. It's always easy to add a little bit more water to it, but the best thing to do for a starting point is to go with what the manufacturer recommends. For Prism, the product we're using today, they recommend 1 quart per bag, and you can add a little bit more if you want it a little bit thinner. Where we're using a small grout joint, we may thin it down just a little bit more. I like to add just a little bit of water to the bottom of the bucket to prevent the powder from sticking. So we're going to go ahead and add our grout. And slowly add our water. Before we add it on, we start spinning it. Shot of it. Slowly add a little more. You see it start taking a little bit of more liquid form. If you've ever seen a grout that when it's dry, it has different shades to it, almost looks like it's 2 or 3 different colors, that's a product of being overwatered. Grout gets overwatered 2 different ways. One is in the initial mixing process, there's too much water added to it, and the other is in the cleanup process, the sponges you're using are too wet. Okay, now that we have that thoroughly mixed, we're going to let that sit for just a few minutes before we start applying it to the towel. It's known as the slake time, usually about 5 minutes. And we usually give it a little bit more of a spin before we get ready to put it on the wall. or the floor, whichever you're doing. But we'll give it about 5 minutes, mix it up again, and start floating it in. Okay, we've given our grout a few minutes to slake. We've mixed it up again, and now we're ready to install. So we're going to use this small section up here for demonstration purposes. This is the consistency we're looking for right here. This is a nice, soft, fluffy grout. We'll load our float up from the side. And we're going to roll it in at an angle. We're going to push it into all those joints. And we're going to wipe it in at multiple angles to really get those joints nice and full. I like to use kind of an X pattern, go back and forth, and really try and pull as much grout off the surface of the tile now as you can. We don't worry about getting any grout up here in these top joints because we're going to fill that in later with a caulk. Our main concern right now is getting the body of the backsplash nice and full. And a little bit goes a long ways. So I'm working lots of different angles to really get that in there. And this is the general process for grouting any tile. We're going to continue this process along the rest of the backsplash. And we're going to show you guys a little time lapse of everything getting grouted in. And then we'll be right back with you when it's time to start the wipe down process. We're ready to do our wipe down process. Our first wipe down will be with as dry of a sponge as possible. We're going to get these and just wring them out. Set them here beside us. More sponges, the better. Just wring out just as hard as you can. Okay, so you see with the grout float, I've pulled as much out of here as possible, or off the surface. We'll start our wipe down just like we did the floating process at an angle. We've got little gaps in it. Don't worry too much about that. We're going to get that later. Flip our sponge over to the clean side until you start seeing a haze coming back, then you go to the next sponge. Keeping these sponges as dry as possible prevents you from getting too much water into your grout that's still very soft. And that prevents us from getting that discoloration I talked about earlier. Little gaps in it. Just apply a little back in. No big deal. All right, now that's got to set up for a little bit, and we'll do a second wipe down with some clean water again. After you've given it 15-20 minutes to set up a little bit, you start to see the grout drying on the surface and get a little bit of a chalky haze to it. It's time to do your second wipe down. Now, once again, we're going to go just as dry as we can. And this will usually be, depending on the tile and the grout you're using, this will be the last step before we wipe it down with a microfiber and a little bit of glass cleaner. This is just to get any of the remaining chunks or remnants that are left on the surface of the tile. You want to keep that rinse water nice and clean. made it this far, we're ready for our final details. Now this is just the icing on the cake. We use a little bit of glass cleaner at the top of our tile. It gets any remaining haze or anything like that off of it, any fingerprints. Really gives it that nice shine at the end. And we can move on to our caulking. I want to take a little bit of just regular painter's caulk. We have our edging pieces here that we installed the other day. We want to just put a nice clean bead of caulk on those along the edge. And along the top. The reason I use the painter's caulk along the top, because some of you may wonder why, is because if these cabinets ever are repainted or have to be touched up, it won't cause an issue. Okay, then along the bottom where our countertop meets our tile, we're going to run a bead of silicone between the tile and the countertop. This is a product that a lot of people struggle with because it's kind of bad about smearing, but I'll show you guys a little trick. I'm gonna lay a nice clean bead in. It wasn't too clean. But then we're going to put a light coating of sprayway on top. Okay, so we've wrapped up all the details on our backsplash install. Everything's grouted, caulked, sealed. We've put our finished hardware on. And I hope your all's project has turned out as good as this one. We enjoyed making the video for you. And if you don't mind, if you liked our video, please subscribe to the channel. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you'd like to see us do in the future. And best of luck on your future projects.